So, by then we start to wonder, even though we have an interesting idea, is it the right idea? Is it okay? A story about an old man? Who's going to watch that? You know, you start testing it. You know, but then after you test it, and you pitch it to other people, and you pitch it, you can't shake it. There's something in there. You haven't fixed everything. But something is keeping that idea alive. And, well, if you're Pete, what you do is just you set off boldly. You tie a bunch of colorful balloons to a Sully, which represents the other movie that Pete had done, Monsters, Inc. And you just think of how to start soaring with this idea. And you set it aloft. And you hope for the best. Hopefully that Sully never landed on anything that could get hurt. I hope not. Anyway, so once you've got something like an idea, maybe a character, maybe this person who's very grumpy, and there's colorful balloons in there, and maybe you have a story of what he does with his life, why he has to be grumpy, or why does he stay in his house if we want him to stay in his house, and where does he go? As soon as you start thinking about that, the fastest way to actually prove something to yourself is that you kind of write it down. It's the fastest way to do it. You don't have to check for grammar. You don't have to do anything that means that it'll be published tomorrow. But just get your ideas down. Put it in a treatment. Set to writing. And be very, very serious about it because, you know, this is serious work. This is actually a picture when we would hold up in a Hotel Claremont. The three of us would be there, and we won't leave until we actually fix the problems that we have that day. We go on these off-sites where it's just the three of us, and with a good supply of cookies, we're going to be okay. But we do this a lot because Pete's phone will always keep ringing, and Bob is always going to be busy, and I'm always going to be in charge of something, and all of us are going to be pressed for time. And the only way we do that is to get away from all the phones and the meetings. And we start writing. And this, at this point, is when you encounter your drafts. Of course, there will be a first draft, there will be a second draft, a third draft. You would actually start to try and make script pages just to test it out. You try and do this as quickly as possible because you can read it to each other and see if the scene is working. You know, you do all the voices of the character and bounce it off each other, and then maybe it's kind of working, yes. And then you keep trying, because you don't do it right the first time. You do a lot of versions of it, and more versions of it. You know, you keep doing it until some parts of it are good. You know, and yet every time that you do it, there are so many ways that you can get it wrong, because I think that's just the nature of the beast. In fact, we do it so much that the joke is always like, why don't you get it right the first time? So we don't have to do all this all the time. Anyway, the next step is, this is kind of where I live. The storyboards. Alongside the writing, creating, and thinking about these characters, the storyboards are starting to be fleshed out. And sequences are going to be explored, even though we don't have script yet. One of the sequences that we start off with, which is the scene of Carl floating his house to start his adventure. Actually, Pete Sohn was sitting up here, actually boarded that for us. Actually, when Pete boarded that first time, it remained unchanged pretty much from the time he first boarded it. So that was really lucky, because Pete has a great skill in actually organizing the thoughts and the needs of the scene and the movie, and just go for it. And what I do is that I start fleshing out the outline of the movie. Where do we go? Now, the series of images you'll see are images that I had constructed very early on. No 2 acts have been done yet. No, all 3 acts are not completed yet. But we had kind of like an outline of it. And these images tend to mirror the big swipes at what we want. And this is, you might recognize this, Ellie and little Carl in their tent. But if you also notice that they're not in Ellie's house. They're in the rundown house that you first meet them in the movie. And then I started exploring other things about the visual elements of the movie, like how to think about the ground versus the sky. And in this drawing, you'll see that I had a lot more ground than there is sky, because this is part of the story of Carl when he's pretty earthbound. We also had Carl, at some point, driving his car, because he had to go to the courthouse, and he's shrunk as an old man, and his head barely clears the steering wheel, so he'd be driving like this. And he actually gets into trouble. And he had some friends that he likes to ignore. People would be visiting him in front porch called a fun bunch. There are a bunch of old people who are enticing Carl to come and join them in the old folks' club. Come on, Carl. We can play some tennis. And he goes, nah. Or he just pretends to be asleep. And of course, the emblematic floating of the house, we had a version of a storm. His house used to go other places other than just directly to South America. And he would land in some tabletop something, even before that. When we were imagining this thing, we were thinking that he was going to land in a desert island, just like Pete's idea. But at that time, that felt like it was something that was done already. So what I did was, out of just sheer desperation, I walked over to Ralph Eggleston's office. He's a production designer at Pixar. And I told him that a long time ago, I read an article in Esquire magazine about a man who went to South America through the jungles and then got faced with a giant stone wall that went straight up. And then he climbed this wall, and then right on top of this, he was kind of on another planet. And I told him, it's like, I don't know what this place is, but I read about it. And then Ralph says, Tepuis. I said, excuse me? Tepuis, you're talking about Tepuis. And he reaches behind my head, he's got a little DVD and pulls out this DVD about Tepuis. And he goes like, and I take that and I go to my office and I play it. And I go, oh my Lord, this is exactly what we need. And then I bring it to Pete, and he watches it. As soon as he watches it, he comes to my room and is like, that thing's amazing. I think we gotta go there. Meaning that we gotta go and set the movie there. I was completely jazzed by this location because Carl is supposed to be a character that's not only earthbound, but he's supposed to go on a journey, and he has a question that there is something that he has to decide. Is he going to go and join his wife up there in the heavens? Or is he going to go and stay here on earth? But we wanted to bring him to a place that's in between, a purgatory of sorts. And what better place than having a tabletop mountain that's a mile high, that's almost up in the clouds, but not down on the ground. So symbolically, it was just spot on. So we had our location, we had our character, we had an adventure to go to.